Keep power.
I call the honourable member Tracy Martin.
Talofa, Mr Chair. Mr Chair, I have no expectations that anything I say here today will change the mind of the government. I have no expectations that anything I say here today will stop them or the ACT Party or the Māori Party from actually voting this legislation through. So why would I spend my time talking about it? So why I would spend my time talking about it is so that it goes onto the Hansard, the misrepresentations that have been wrapped round the rhetoric of this bill. The first one is that I think that the public of New Zealand needs to be aware of, and is a conversation that is yet to take place out in the mainstream media, is around how these schools will actually be funded. They will be funded at a decile 3 level. A decile 3 level with a full cash-up value of the property dollar and a full cash-up value of all the resource dollars currently available to mainstream schools at a decile 3 level. Now, some may say, well, that's the target market. But these schools have an open door policy. They can't pick that target market. Anybody that shows up at their door, whether they live in a decile 10 home or a decile 7 home or a decile 1 home, must be allowed to enrol in these schools. But they will all be funded at a decile 3 level. So you could have a charter school that is full of decile 10 children funded out of vote education at a decile 3 level with full cash-up of property dollar and full cash-up of resources dollar. But they don't have to spend that cash-up on property or on resources. That's the margin. That's the profit margin. And let's just say, for example, sir, that they do spend the property dollar on the property. The asset belongs to the sponsor. This is private money paying, this is public money paying for private schools, paying for private assets, paying for private profit, and paying the other part that we pay for are the aero reviews that we could actually put a dollar value on, for the professional development that we could actually put a dollar value on, that every single one of these private businesses will be able to access, sir. So let's get real about how these things are being funded. And this is something the public of New Zealand needs to know because it's their dollar. Because it's their dollar. No, they may not be hiding it, Mr King, but you certainly didn't put out a press release on it, did you? So, and the reason why they're going to be funded at that level, sir, is because the basic operations grant for a mainstream school per child is $6,000. $6,000 per child per annum, and that includes the property dollar. That's the basic grant per year that mainstream schools get. And then on top of that are the targeted education grants. Now that is not enough. That is not enough for a private school funded by public money to make a profit. The cheapest recognised private school in my area, their fee is $12,000 a year. So when this was first floated, and when the ACT Party and actually the National Party went out and spoke to their friends inside the private school sector, they got a message back saying we can't deliver for that price. We can't deliver for that price because nobody can. Mainstream schools are, but private schools say they cannot deliver for that price. So the government said, how much do you want? How much do you want? And then let's go away and figure out an equation that equals what you want. And that's actually what has happened. That's what's happened, and that's why you've got this list, supposedly, of 35 schools, and I would say to the Māori Party, and particularly to the President, Mr Bird, you should be whakama. You should be ashamed. You should be whakama on the way you have decided to actually, and in select committee, to suggest that you're going to take 23 successful kura under the current Act and leave the option open inside your submission to make more money by turning them into charter schools. Because that is what Mr Curtis and what Mr Bird, the door they left open when they submitted. They have successful kura inside the current system. They have no need to go outside of it, but there's more money outside of it. And the other thing Mr Bird said was, it's too hard. When what he was referring to was the standards and the requirement that they are tested against to make sure that they have a very high standard of academic outcome. And they meet them. Mr. Chair?
Tracy Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's another statement I want to address for the public of New Zealand, because everybody in this House actually knows it. And it was a statement made by Catherine Isaacs in the Working Party submission. Now, we all know Catherine Isaacs. She's the previous president of the ACT Party, and it's very, very interesting that as the previous president of the ACT Party, the policy that is now under the name of her party has created a job. Where there was no job previously, there is now a job, and Ms Isaacs is filling it. But it's not just a job for this moment, up to this moment, when this bill goes through this House. Since the Authorisation Board was appointed on the 1st of March, she's now got a job going forward. That's a really cool way to create an income for yourself. So, and that board who's been the ones recommending the schools is now going to be the body that monitors those schools and their progress against the agreed outcomes. So that makes the Authorisation Board, in a way, their own review body. They said these guys would be the good ones to actually put forward a school, and now they've got to do a report to say whether their recommendations were appropriate or not. I don't see any incentive for honest reporting there, sir. But let's get back to Ms Isaacs' statement. Her statement was, employing unregistered teachers does not mean they are unqualified. Yes, it does, Mr Chair. Now we're going to hear the National Party MPs say no, it doesn't. And this is the ignorance involved in the conversation. The process of registration for a teacher is a period of 2 years spent inside a school with an experienced tutor teacher being appraised in your practical application of the 4 years of theory. This is the teaching apprenticeship. The teaching apprenticeship. You're not a trained teacher till you get registration. So it does mean you are unqualified. And considering it was the previous national government that changed the environment so that teacher training became about bums on seats, this registration process is even more pivotal, sir. It's this absolute lack of basic understanding that makes any constructive conversation with the ACT Party, and unfortunately some of my colleagues in the National Party, it's virtually impossible. Hence my expectations of nothing at the end of today's conversation. Now, in an answer to oral question number 6 on the 8th of May, the Minister of Education tried to reassure the public that if there was an incident of misconduct in a charter school that involved a teacher, then the procedures of the 1989 Act and the Teachers' Council would apply. Now, Dr. Cam Calder, after Mr. Hipkins quite rightly pointed out anomalies in this statement, Dr. Cam Calder stood at second reading, and I quote, "I just want to correct an assertion made by my colleague Mr. Chris Hipkins, who believed that partnership schools are exempt from current exemptions in the Education Act 1989 regarding the employment or the continuing employment of a teacher whose practising certificate or limited authority to teach has been suspended or cancelled. The schools are not exempt from those current restrictions." Now, I'm not sure if this is very, very clever by Dr. Calder in trying to manipulate the discussion, and by the Minister also around the playing of words, or whether he actually just needs to go back to his office and give his research team a bit of a bollocking. It is not possible to hold a practising certificate unless you are a registered teacher with the Teachers' Council. Registration comes first, and then the individual must be in the classroom for a prescribed number of hours each year, with the constant appraisals that go on during that period, and the individual must prove this to renew their practising certificate every 5 years. So Mr. Hipkins is right. Only registered teachers can be tracked, only registered teachers can be deregistered and recorded on a national database for incidents of misbehaviour. These schools, if there are children, well, let's just reinforce the point. If children are victims of misconduct by an unregistered charter schools teacher, there is no body recording these incidents. There is nothing to stop these so-called teachers moving from one charter school to another. No protection whatsoever. There is no register of them anywhere. Perhaps the government may now have to take more education dollar to create a duplicate system of registration so that these profit-making businesses can keep themselves safe while they skim off the taxpayer dollars. And they tell us that... Mr. Chair?
I'm going to call the honourable member Cam Calder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Exceptionally civil of you. Mr. Chairman.